The high stakes of greed, my $1 million divorce showdown. I'm taking half of everything, including your grandmother's estate, Bradley declared, a smug smirk plastered across his face. His voice rang through the courtroom with the casual arrogance of someone announcing a winning lottery ticket. The sheer confidence in his tone made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to stay composed at the defendant's table. My name is Judith Crawford. At 45, I never imagined I'd be sitting in a Nashville divorce court, watching my husband of 5 years attempt to dismantle everything I'd spent a lifetime building. Bradley sat across from me, looking like he'd already cashed a check. His designer suit, purchased with my money, naturally, was flawless, and his golden hair was slicked back in that charming style that used to make me melt, but now only made me shudder. Your Honor, Bradley's attorney chimed in, my client is entitled to 50% of all marital assets, including the substantial inheritance Mrs. Crawford received during the union. The lawyer's briefcase was overflowing with spreadsheets, all mapping out Bradley's plan to seize my grandmother's legacy. I felt the eyes of the gallery on me. Spectators leaned in, captivated by the promise of a multi-million-dollar fallout. I could practically hear them doing the math. A few reporters had even squeezed into the back row, lured by the scent of a high-profile scandal involving a well-known Nashville entrepreneur. Presiding over the chaos was Judge Richardson, a formidable woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and a gaze that could pierce through granite. She'd spent 2 decades in family court and likely thought she'd seen it all. But I had a feeling I was about to show her something new. Bradley glanced over, flashing me a victorious smile. The audacity was breathtaking. This was the same man who once brought me breakfast in bed and swore he loved me for my soul, not my bank account. 5 years of marriage turned out to be nothing more than a long-con performance. The courtroom felt heavy, the dark wood paneling echoing the gravity of the moment. Outside, the muffled hum of Nashville traffic reminded me that life was moving on for everyone else while mine was being dissected by strangers. I gripped my purse, feeling the weight of the envelope inside, the one that was about to flip the script. Mrs. Crawford, Judge Richardson said, her voice steady. Do you have a response to these claims? I stood up slowly. My heart was racing, but my resolve was absolute. Your Honor, I believe there is a critical document the court needs to examine. The beginning of the lie. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. I was just too blinded by greed to see them. I had met Bradley shortly after my 40th birthday. At the time, I was pouring all my energy into my consulting firm, Bright Veil Analytics. I was successful, but I was also lonely. My grandmother, my anchor, had passed away 3 years prior, and I was still adrift. Bradley appeared at a business conference in Memphis like a character from a romance novel. He was attentive, charismatic, and seemed fascinated by my work. You're brilliant, Judith, he'd whisper while I analyzed financial data. I've never met a woman who commands numbers like you do. I thought he was admiring my intellect. In reality, he was auditing my net worth. Our relationship was a whirlwind of 5-star dinners and weekend getaways. Though he worked as a pharmaceutical sales manager, he always seemed to have the funds for grand gestures. I believe in investing in what I love, he'd say whenever I questioned the cost. I didn't realize I was the investment. When he proposed after only 8 months, I hesitated. My grandmother always warned me about men who moved too fast, but Bradley was relentless. Life is too short to wait for perfect timing, he insisted. He proposed on a private riverboat, complete with a string quartet. The ring was massive, likely worth more than his annual salary, though I was too swept up to wonder where the money came from. My attorney, Patricia Holbrook, insisted on a prenuptial agreement. A businesswoman with your trajectory needs a safety net, she'd argued. I felt guilty bringing it up, worried Bradley would think I didn't trust him, but Bradley just laughed it off. Darling, if it makes you feel secure, I'll sign whatever you want. I'm marrying you, not your assets. He signed the papers with a flourish, barely glancing at the text, joking that love didn't need a fine print. I felt an immense sense of relief. Patricia had been thorough, specifically protecting my grandmother's future estate. I thought she was being paranoid. I was wrong. The mask slips. The turning point came 18 months into the marriage. My grandmother's estate was settled, and she had left me everything: her home, her investments, and $2.8 million in liquid funds. Bradley's eyes didn't just light up when I told him, they burned. Judith, we're rich, he breathed. That we should have been my final warning. Within half a year, Bradley quit his job, claiming he wanted to focus on supporting my vision. In reality, he became a professional spender. He bought a luxury SUV for networking, dropped $30,000 of my money on a friend's failing restaurant, and joined the most exclusive country club in the city. Every time I tried to set a boundary, he'd gaslight me, calling me untrusting or controlling. The breaking point arrived 6 months ago. I overheard him at the club telling a group of investors that the inheritance was his family's wealth. He was reinventing himself as a self-made tycoon using my grandmother's blood, sweat, and tears. When I confronted him, the charming Bradley vanished. You were a lonely workaholic before I saved you, he spat. Everyone knows you bought your way into a social life. Then, I found the emails. Bradley and his lawyer had been plotting a divorce for months, specifically timing it to maximize his lifestyle contribution claims under Tennessee law. He wasn't just leaving, he was trying to execute a hostile takeover of my life. That was the day I called Patricia. The courtroom reversal. Now, back in the courtroom, I handed the manila envelope to the bailiff. The silence was deafening. Bradley's smugness began to leak away, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "What is this, Mrs. Crawford?" Judge Richardson asked. "It's the prenuptial agreement my husband signed 5 years ago, Your Honor." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Bradley's lawyer, Gerald Weston, jumped up. "Your Honor, we were never informed of such a document. This is irregular." He didn't even have legal counsel. Judge Richardson looked over her spectacles. The document explicitly advised him to seek counsel, which he waived in writing. "Mr. Crawford, did you read this before signing?" The silence stretched. Bradley looked trapped. I skimmed it." Judith said it didn't matter. "So," the judge concluded, "you signed a legal contract involving millions of dollars without reading it, and now you want me to void it because you didn't take it seriously?" The final verdict. The judge began reading the highlights for the record. Section 4, Paragraph B. Any inheritance received during the marriage shall remain the sole, separate property of the recipient. Bradley's face turned a sickly shade of green. Section 6. Both parties waive the right to alimony or spousal support, regardless of the disparity in income. "That can't be legal," Bradley muttered, his voice cracking. "And," I added, standing up, "I have documented proof that the inheritance was never commingled. It stayed in separate accounts. I paid for our life from my salary. His investments were funded by personal draws he took from my accounts." The judge nodded. "Mr. Crawford, not only does this agreement protect Mrs. Crawford's assets, but Section 7 states that individual debts remain the responsibility of the person who incurred them." Patricia handed over a final folder. "Your Honor, these are the records of Mr. Crawford's personal debts, credit cards, the car loan, and the restaurant loss, totaling $87,000. The judge didn't hesitate. She slammed her gavel down with a sound like a gunshot. "The prenuptial agreement stands. Mr. Crawford, you are entitled to 0% of the assets. You are, however, solely responsible for the $87,000 in debt you accumulated. Divorce granted." "We are adjourned." The aftermath. Bradley sat there, frozen, as the gallery cleared. He had spent 5 years playing a game, only to realize he'd lost on opening day. He went from dreaming of millions to facing a nearly $90,000 hole and no place to live. "Judith, wait," he called out as I walked toward the door. "We can talk about this." I didn't stop. "Bradley, the only thing we have to talk about is how much you underestimated me. You didn't marry a woman, you tried to marry a bank. The bank is closed." In the months that followed, Bradley's life disintegrated. The debt forced him into a humiliating bankruptcy. His high-roller reputation in Nashville vanished overnight, replaced by the mockery of his former peers. He ended up moving back into his parents' basement in Memphis, working an entry-level job he hated. As for me, I used a portion of my grandmother's wealth to start the Crawford Foundation. We provide legal resources and protection for women facing financial abuse and complex divorces. My grandmother's legacy didn't just buy me a comfortable life, it bought me my freedom. And that is something no amount of Bradley's charm could ever take away.